Imagine you travel to a country that, the evening news basically just constantly broadcasts as one of the most volatile, dangerous places on the face of the earth.
Right.
You step off the plane, your guard is completely up, your head is just on a swivel.
Yeah, you're expecting the worst.
Exactly. But then you hail a cab, and the driver, point blank, refuses to take your money. Just refuses, because you are a guest in his country.
Which is wild.
It's crazy. And then, you try to leave your hotel in this border town, and the government dispatches a police truck with 3 guys carrying AK-47s.
Sounds terrifying, honestly.
Right. But they aren't there to arrest you. They are there to happily escort you to get a cup of tea, completely free of charge. You're expecting a war zone, and instead you are aggressively bombarded with some of the most radical hospitality on the planet. So today, we are taking a massive deep dive into Pakistan.
It's really the ultimate collision of expectations versus reality. I mean, for anyone listening right now, whatever your mental model of Pakistan is, you kind of need to prepare to have it completely dismantled today.
That is our exact mission. We're looking at a nation of over 240 million people that mostly exists in the minds of people in the West as just a geopolitical headline.
Yeah, a soundbite on the news.
Right. But the reality on the ground is just this labyrinth of staggering contrasts. And to figure out how a country can be simultaneously so generous and so structurally paralyzed, we've pulled a really fascinating, eclectic stack of sources.
And we really have. I mean, we're looking at raw, unvarnished travel vlog transcripts from creators like Hugh Abroad and the Holofly podcast.
They're great.
Yeah, these are guys who just hit the ground with cameras to see what would happen. No filter.
No filter at all. And we're layering their street-level view with this deep historical bedrock from a Wikipedia overview to really understand the timeline. And then finally, we're pulling from the local Pakistani press itself.
Right, which gives us the internal perspective.
Exactly. We've got a razor-sharp political analysis from a July 2026 edition of the Friday Times, and this blistering sports editorial from the Express Tribune about the 2026 ICC Women's T20 World Cup.
And what makes this stack so powerful is the friction. Like the friction between the sources. You have a tourist marveling at a plate of street food on one page, and then a political analyst warning of an impending climate apocalypse on the next.
It's jarring.
It is.
Yeah.
And our job is to find the connective tissue between that free cup of chai and the collapse of a political constitution.
So let's start by digging into the very dirt this country is built on. Because to understand the chaotic, vibrant street level of modern Karachi or Lahore, you can't just look at the last 70-odd years.
No, not at all.
You have to understand the deep tectonic plates of the region's history. Going through the historical timeline in our sources, it fundamentally shatters the idea that Pakistan is just this, new state born in the 20th century.
Right. I mean, the modern borders are new, sure. But the geography is quite literally the cradle of human civilization. We are talking about the Neolithic site of Mehrgarh in Baltistan.
And how old is that again?
It dates back 8,500 years.
That is insane to think about.
Yeah, and this wasn't just like a handful of people in caves. This was one of the earliest sites in the world with evidence of farming and herding.
Wow.
And then you fast forward a bit and you hit the Bronze Age with the Indus Valley civilization.
Right, Harappa and all that.
Exactly. Cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. And they weren't just settlements. They were absolute marvels of urban planning. They had baked brick houses, complex drainage systems.
Like actual plumbing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Water supply mechanisms that would rival some modern municipalities today, honestly.
It's wild to think about. We're talking thousands of years before the Romans were building aqueducts, and people in the Indus Valley were living in highly organized, structurally sophisticated urban centers. But they weren't operating in a vacuum, right? The geography of Pakistan basically made it the ancient world's grand central station.
Yeah, the term crossroads of empires gets thrown around a lot in history, but here, it's really the defining feature of the land.
Because of where it sits.
Exactly. Bridging Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. Everyone who was anyone marched through here. The Achaemenid Empire came in from the west in 517 BCE.
Okay.
Then you have Alexander the Great sweeping through, engaging in the massive battle of the Hydaspes against King Porus in 326 BCE.
Right. The Greeks were there.
Yeah. Then the Mauryan Empire expands under Ashoka. And what is crucial to understand here is the mechanism of this constant conquering. It wasn't just armies burning things down and then leaving.
And he stayed.
Well, they left their cultures, their scholars, their philosophies behind.
Which creates this incredible intellectual melting pot. And my favorite detail from the sources regarding this is Taxila.
Oh, yes. One of the earliest centers of higher education in the world.
Established in the 6th century BCE. Like, we think of the modern university as this very Western invention, but you had people flocking to Taxila thousands of years ago.
Alexander's forces even documented it when they came through.
Yeah, you had Chinese pilgrims literally walking across treacherous mountain ranges in the 4th and 5th centuries just to study there.
It's incredible dedication.
It was the absolute epicenter of Greco-Buddhist culture. It makes you realize that the DNA of this region is fundamentally rooted in the exchange of vast global ideas.
It is. But the most significant cultural exchange, the one that really defines the modern state, begins a bit later, in the 7th and 8th centuries.
Right, the arrival of Islam.
Exactly. You have Arab generals, notably Muhammad ibn Qasim, conquering the Sindh region in 711 CE. However, military conquest alone doesn't change the soul of a population, you know.
Right. It takes more than just soldiers to change what people believe.
The sources highlight that the real mechanism of change was actually the Sufi missionaries.
I want to dig into that because how does a relatively small number of missionaries peacefully convert this massive entrenched population over the centuries?
They didn't do it by demanding a hard break from the past, which is key. Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam, and its practitioners integrated Islamic teachings with the existing local cultural practices.
Like the local music and stuff.
Yes, music, poetry, local traditions. They made the new religion accessible and resonant with the indigenous traditions rather than feeling completely alien to them.
So it was a blending.
Exactly. And this slow, deep integration culminated centuries later in the incredibly opulent Indo-Persian culture of the Mughal Empire.
Right, which was massive.
From the 16th to the 18th centuries. That's what gives us the grand architecture in cities like Lahore today.
So the region builds this incredibly rich tapestry. You've got Indus Valley infrastructure, Greek philosophy, Buddhist scholarship, and grand Islamic empires.
Yeah.
But then the British Empire enters the chat.
They do tend to do that.
Right. So they take Karachi in 1839. And back then, according to the source, it was just a tiny fishing village with a mud fort.
Barely anything there.
But the British realize its strategic maritime value, and they turn it into a massive military and trading base.
And by 1893, through just relentless military campaigns, the entirety of modern Pakistan is swallowed by the British Indian Empire.
Which brings us to the 20th century, and an event that, it still dictates the daily anxiety of the region today.
The partition of India in 1947.
Partition it's the trauma that birthed the modern nation. The British are leaving, and the decision is made to divide the subcontinent into two independent dominions, right?
Yes, a Hindu-majority India and a Muslim-majority Pakistan.
I tried to come up with an analogy for this for the listener because the scale is just so incomprehensible.
It really is hard to grasp.
So imagine a massive, sprawling estate where a multi-generational family has lived for centuries. They have their squabbles, sure, but they share the kitchen, the gardens, the history.
Right.
Suddenly, a foreign judge comes in, bangs the gavel, and dictates a fiercely contested overnight divorce. A line is hastily drawn right down the middle of the house.
Just completely arbitrarily in some places.
Exactly. And you are told that by midnight, you have to pack whatever you can carry and move to the side of the house that corresponds with your religion.
And if you don't?
If you find yourself on the wrong side of the living room, you aren't just unwelcome, your life is in immediate danger. You leave behind your generational wealth, your ancestral graveyard, your business, just to rush behind a new fence.
The human cost of that hastily drawn line cannot be overstated. We're looking at the largest mass migration in human history.
The numbers in the sources are just staggering.
They're chilling. 6.5 million Muslims moving from India into West Pakistan, and 4.7 million Hindus and Sikhs fleeing West Pakistan into India.
Millions of people moving simultaneously.
And it was not a peaceful transition at all. The ensuing communal violence and riots resulted in up to 2 million dead. Trains arrived at stations just full of slaughtered refugees. That level of absolute carnage isn't just an event in a history book. It rewrites the psychological DNA of the survivors.
Yeah, that kind of generational trauma doesn't just go away. And what's wild is that this event literally created the name of the country out of thin air.
The etymology is fascinating.
The word Pakistan didn't even exist until a 1933 pamphlet titled Now or Never by an activist named Chaudhry Ramat Ali.
Right.
He built an acronym out of the homelands in the Northwest. So P for Punjab, A for Afghania, which was the Northwest Frontier Province, K for Kashmir, S for Sindh, and Tan from Baluchistan.
It's remarkably clever.
And in a stroke of brilliant branding, in Persian and Urdu, Pak means pure and Stan means land. So it becomes the land of the pure.
It was a very powerful rallying cry, but it raises a profound complication for the new country.
How so?
The independence movement, led by figures like Muhammad Ali Jinnah, relied heavily on the two-nation theory.
Okay, what is that exactly?
It was the assertion that Hindus and Muslims were not just different religious groups, but fundamentally distinct nations with irreconcilable cultures and histories.
Which means the very justification for Pakistan's existence is a negative definition.
Exactly.
It is defined essentially by being not India.
Precisely. And that answers the question of how a nation reconciles an 8,500-year history with a 1947 birth date.
Because they have to build an identity fast.
Yes. While the ancient Indus Valley provides a geographic claim to the land, the psychological and political identity of the modern state is almost entirely consumed by the trauma of partition and the existential rivalry with India.
It's all about looking over the fence.
The two-nation theory meant unifying incredibly diverse ethnic groups, Punjabis, Balaks, Sindhis, Pashtuns, who all had their own distinct languages and cultures.
And putting them all under one roof.
Under a single umbrella of Islamic nationalism. And to keep that very diverse umbrella from collapsing, the state feels it has to constantly maintain a posture of vigilance against an external threat.
Right.
Every political alliance, every military budget, every foreign policy decision is weighed against that foundational trauma.
You're basically building a house out of defensive walls before you even figure out what the living room should look like.
That's a great way to put it.
And that defensive posture on the global stage is exactly why Western media usually paints Pakistan in these broad, terrifying strokes.
Absolutely.
If you ask a random person on the street what they think of when you say Pakistan, they usually picture a volatile danger zone. But that brings us to the travel vloggers and our source stack.
Right, Hugh Abroad and the Whole Fly podcast guys.
Because the moment these guys stepped out of the airport, that media-driven illusion of danger completely evaporated into something much more complex.
The contrast is startling. Both Hugh and Chris from Holofly entered the country carrying severe anxieties fed by Western headlines.
They were ready for things to go wrong.
Hugh explicitly states that he anticipated danger, but quickly realized he never felt unsafe at any point during his trip.
Now, I do want to flag a major caveat here for the listener. Both of these creators are solo male travelers.
That is a very important distinction.
Yeah, the experience of walking the streets of Karachi alone would be vastly different for a solo female traveler, just given the conservative nature of the society.
Without a doubt.
But for these guys, the defining characteristic of Pakistan wasn't danger. It was a level of hospitality that borders on, aggressive.
Aggressive hospitality is the perfect term for it. The mechanics of this generosity are just fascinating. Hugh notes that half of the taxi rides he took, literally 50%, the driver would refuse his money.
I could not believe that detail when I read it.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
Imagine driving a cab in a developing economy, battling traffic, burning expensive gas, and when a Western tourist with a camera tries to pay you, you refuse.
He said he literally had to throw the money onto the seat and sprint away from the car so the driver wouldn't hand it back.
That is hilarious. And Chris had the exact same experience with food. Locals were constantly inviting him to sit down, offering free meals, endless cups of chai, just to talk to him.
Chris even hired a local guide in Islamabad. And the guide was utterly bewildered by what he was witnessing.
Because the guide wasn't getting things for free.
Exactly. The guide told Chris he had never seen a foreigner treated this way. He pointed out the irony that as a local Pakistani, he was always charged full price or even more, while the tourist was getting everything for free.
Which, makes me deeply skeptical for a second.
Sure, it sounds too good to be true.
If the local guide is shocked by the free food, is this hospitality actually a genuine pillar of Pakistan culture? Or is this just performative tourist privilege?
Like they're acting for the camera.
Right. Are they just putting on a show because a guy with a foreign accent is holding a GoPro?
It's a very valid challenge, but the reality is a confluence of religious duty and sheer novelty.
Okay, unpack that.
Within the Islamic tradition, there is a profound, religiously mandated emphasis on honoring the traveler. Offering food and shelter to a guest is considered a way of inviting blessings into your home.
So it is culturally ingrained.
Yes, but the catalyst that turns this from a polite custom into overwhelming generosity is the extreme rarity of international tourists.
Oh, right, because they aren't dealing with the fatigue of mass tourism. This isn't Rome or Bangkok.
Exactly. Pakistan is not seeing 40 million visitors a year. Because foreign tourists are such an anomaly, especially in the wake of negative global press, locals are intensely curious.
They want to know why you're there.
They want to know why you braved the supposed danger to visit their home. Furthermore, they are deeply aware of their country's poor international reputation, and they feel this personal, communal duty to prove it wrong.
So it's not fake.
It's not a cynical performance at all. It's an authentic impulse, amplified by the rarity of the event. Because the culture hasn't been saturated by tourism, the hospitality hasn't been commodified yet.
That makes total sense. And it perfectly explains the contrast the vloggers drew with India.
Right.
Hugh points out that while India is visually stunning and incredibly diverse, the street-level experience for a foreigner can be highly transactional.
Everyone's trying to sell you something.
Yeah. If someone approaches you in a major Indian tourist hub, there's usually an angle. They want a donation, they want to guide you, they want to lead you into their cousin's carpet shop. The interactions are monetized.
Yeah.
But in Pakistan, they literally just wanted to sit and have a genuine conversation about where Hugh was from.
When hospitality becomes an industry, it inevitably loses its soul. The transaction replaces the connection.
But wait, I have to bring up the ultimate paradox of this whole safety narrative.
The Peshawar story.
Yes, because there is a massive exception in the whole of life source. We're talking about how remarkably safe the locals make you feel, and then Chris decides to travel to Peshawar.
Peshawar is in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, right near the border with Afghanistan.
Which changes things.
The geopolitical context here is vital. Following the United States' withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, the border regions experienced a significant spike in volatility.
Yeah.
Cross-border militancy and crime became real threats again.
So Chris checks into his hotel in Peshawar, drops his bags, and tries to walk out the front door to go film some street food.
Standard vlogger stuff.
And the lady at the front desk physically stops him. She tells him point blank, tourists are not allowed to leave the premises without an armed guard.
The state mandate kicks in.
Yes. And what happens next is just so uniquely Pakistani. 10 minutes later, a heavy-duty police truck rolls up to the hotel.
Right.
3 government police officers jump out holding AK-47s, and they greet Chris with massive smiles, saying, "Hello, my friend. Welcome to Pakistan. We're going to keep you safe today."
It's so surreal.
And they basically chauffeur him around the city to get tea. And the government provides this heavily armed escort entirely for free. Chris said on the podcast he had no idea whether he should feel incredibly safe or absolutely terrified.
It's the perfect microcosm of the state's anxiety, really.
What do you mean?
Well, the government of Pakistan is acutely aware that a single Western vlogger getting kidnapped or harmed in Peshawar would be an unmitigated public relations disaster.
It would ruin whatever tourism they have.
It would set back their fledgling tourism industry by a decade. So, lacking the nuanced infrastructure to quietly secure the region, they deploy the blunt instrument of state resources. They give the vlogger a personal paramilitary squad.
It's a very loud solution.
It ensures the tourist's physical safety, but it's a glaring, flashing neon sign reminding you that beneath the warm, street-level hospitality, the geopolitical fault lines are still highly active and dangerous.
It is sensory overload on a geopolitical scale.
Very true.
But the actual physical sensory overload of walking those streets is just as intense, especially when it comes to the food, because that legendary hospitality we just dissected, the delivery mechanism for that hospitality is almost exclusively culinary.
And the sources paint a picture of a food culture that is heavy, rich, and deeply traditional.
Hugh Abroad does this fascinating culinary showdown between his time in India and his time in Pakistan.
Who wins?
Well, he admits he prefers India's breakfast game.
Okay, fair enough.
He raves about Bengaluru, the crispy dosas that shatter like glass, the soft iglas, the incredible filter coffee, and the street corner jalebis in Delhi, these hot, gooey, toffee-like sweets you can get for 100 rupees.
Sounds amazing.
India's food felt quick and vibrant to him, but Pakistan's food. Pakistan is an exercise in slow, carnivorous patience.
It is a profoundly meat-dominant culture, heavily influenced by those historical Indo-Persian and Mughal roots we discussed earlier.
Hugh becomes obsessed with the beef nahari in Karachi, specifically at a spot called Zahed Nahari.
The famous one.
We're talking about beef that has been slow cooking in massive cauldrons for hours until it practically dissolves into a thick, spiced marrow gravy, scooped up with blisteringly hot, fresh naan.
It is heavy duty.
He called it a top 5 dish of his entire life. Even the street sweets are heavier, like hot gulab jamun sitting over charcoal on a wooden cart in Lahore.
And the chai culture is different too.
Yeah. India serves up these quick 10 rupee hits of chai in little paper cups for people rushing to work. Pakistan serves larger portions in glass cups. It's slightly pricier, but it's designed for you to sit down and linger.
It sounds idyllic. It really does. But any deep dive into street food in a developing nation requires a frank discussion about the biological reality of the experience.
Yeah, we have to talk about the shits.
We do.
The vloggers do not sugarcoat this at all, and it is a brutal reality check. Chris recounts getting violently ill with food poisoning during his first trip to Karachi.
It's almost a rite of passage, unfortunately.
He was confined to his bathroom, dealing with severe cramps and vomiting. He actually had to call his friend Luke, who is apparently a veteran of Pakistani street food, to get a specific medicinal regimen from a local pharmacy just to survive the week.
Wow.
It broke Chris's spirit to the point where he explicitly stated he refuses to eat street food there anymore. He only eats at high-end steakhouses or the international chicken chain, Nando's.
It's a harsh biological barrier. Hugh did note that the hygiene practices at Pakistani street stalls often looked slightly better to him than in India.
Yeah, he said he saw vendors using tongs and wiping down surfaces.
Right, but visual cleanliness doesn't alter the microscopic reality. The local bacterial flora, the immense amounts of heavy cooking oils, and the intense spice profiles are simply incompatible with a Western stomach that hasn't built up the necessary enzymes and immunities.
Your stomach just doesn't know what to do with it.
Eating where the locals eat is a biological roll of dice.
And it's not just your digestive system that experiences a shock, you know? The cultural friction can be just as jarring.
Like the story with Chris in Islamabad.
Yes. That story perfectly encapsulates this. Chris is an American guy, completely covered in tattoos.
Right.
And he acknowledges in the podcast that tattoos are considered haram or forbidden in conservative Islam. So he tries to be respectful by wearing a long-sleeved UV jacket.
Which is considerate.
But it is 40 degrees Celsius outside.
Oh, that's brutal.
That's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity is crushing. So to survive, he wears a pair of shorts.
Which breaks a fundamental modesty norm in that specific environment.
Exactly. So he's sitting there, sweating, and this kind, elderly local man approaches him. The man warmly offers him some tea and then offers him a glass of water.
Nice guy.
But Chris looks at the glass, and the water is literally yellow and cloudy. It is undeniably unsafe to drink.
Definitely a pass.
So Chris politely declines, and suddenly the interaction turns. The sweet old man starts sternly scolding Chris.
Really?
He tells him that Allah is watching him and is deeply disappointed by his lack of modesty because his knees are showing. He tells Chris he has no style and needs to fundamentally change his appearance to be a better human being.
To a Western listener, that sounds incredibly invasive.
It sounds super rude.
Yeah, in the US or Europe, confronting a stranger on the street about their clothing is a massive social taboo. But to understand this interaction, you really have to look at the mechanism of a communal, faith-based society.
Okay, how so?
The older man wasn't being malicious or trying to ruin Chris's day. In his worldview, society is a shared moral fabric. He felt a religious and communal duty to correct what he saw as a moral failing.
So he thought he was helping.
Exactly. Offering the water was an act of physical charity. Correcting the shorts was an act of spiritual charity. He was quite literally trying to save Chris's soul.
Well, Chris didn't see it that way. He just felt incredibly awkward, went back to his hotel, and put on heavy jeans in 100-degree heat just to avoid being yelled at again.
Can't say I blame him.
But you know, that glass of dirty yellow water the man offered, it's the perfect, tragic metaphor for our next major theme.
Infrastructure.
Yes, because beneath the rich culture and the intense hospitality, the basic physical and digital infrastructure of Pakistan is severely broken.
The infrastructural gap between Pakistan and its neighbors is glaring, and the travel sources highlight exactly how this friction manifests daily.
The digital comparison with India is night and day. Hugh mentions that India is racing into the future with cashless systems.
They're everywhere now.
They have QR code payments everywhere. You can buy a 10 rupee cup of chai from a guy sitting on an overturned bucket, and you can pay for it with an app on your phone. It is seamless.
Right.
Their metros in Delhi and Mumbai might be chaotic and pushy, but they are modern, clean, and highly efficient. Pakistan, on the other hand, is still trapped in a fiercely cash-heavy reality.
And accessing that cash as an outsider is an absolute nightmare.
Hugh said 95% of the ATMs he tried violently rejected his foreign bank cards.
95%.
Yeah. He was walking around Karachi terrified he was going to run out of money. He eventually had to hire a taxi to drive him across the city just to find a specific standard chartered bank branch because it was the only machine in the entire country that would talk to his Western bank.
That is wildly inconvenient.
And the digital connectivity. Chris and Harry from Hollowfly said the Wi-Fi was almost non-existent. Chris was staying in a nice hotel, eating at that high-end Nando's, and the internet was completely unusable.
So you have to be prepared.
They warned that buying a digital eSIM before your plane lands is not a luxury. It is a vital survival tool. And then you have these bizarre geopolitical digital blocks.
Oh, right, the airline issue.
Chris was trying to book a flight out on Air India, and the website wouldn't even load because Pakistani servers block it due to national tensions.
See, this isn't just a minor inconvenience for vloggers trying to upload a video, you know? The mechanism of a cash-heavy society is a massive anchor on a nation's development.
I was thinking about this like a classic vintage car. Imagine a beautifully restored 1960s Mustang. The exterior is stunning. The leather seats have incredible soul. It turns heads everywhere it goes.
Okay, I'm with you.
That's Pakistan's culture and hospitality. But under the hood, the transmission, the digital and physical infrastructure is completely shot. The car looks great, but it can't get out of first gear.
It's a great analogy.
I have to ask, why? Is this lack of QR codes and banking interoperability just lazy bureaucratic inefficiency? Or is it a symptom of a country deliberately isolated from the global financial system?
It is a toxic combination of both, really. But the economic consequence is what matters here. When a society runs on physical cash, it operates largely as an informal, gray economy.
Under the table, basically.
Right. If transactions aren't digitized, they aren't easily tracked. And if they aren't tracked, they cannot be efficiently taxed by the government.
So the state is essentially starving itself of revenue.
Exactly. And without robust tax revenue, the government cannot fund the massive capital projects required to modernize the country.
Ah, I see.
They can't build the modern metro systems. They can't upgrade the municipal water treatment plants, which brings us right back to that glass of dirty yellow water offered to Chris.
It's all connected.
It is. The inability to process foreign cards seamlessly also acts as an invisible wall, stunting the growth of the tourism industry by making it too difficult for casual travelers to spend money. While India leapfrogs into the digital age, bringing millions of people into the formal banking sector, Pakistan's infrastructural lag keeps its economic engine stalling.
That structural failure makes you wonder if they're even capable of handling an influx of modern tourism.
It's a huge question.
Which leads us to the untouched northern regions. Because if the southern cities like Karachi are this chaotic, cash-strapped sensory overload, the north offers a reality so pristine and different, it forces a massive debate among our sources about whether Pakistan should even want tourists to come.
The geography of the north is truly staggering, even by global standards.
We are talking about regions like the Hunza Valley and Skardu.
This is the home of K2 and some of the highest, most formidable mountain ranges on the planet. The travel vloggers frequently compare the visual majesty of it to Switzerland, but untouched and untamed.
Harry from the podcast flat out said the Hunza Valley was the greatest place he has ever visited in his entire life.
That's high praise.
But what fascinated me is that the North isn't just geographically different. Biologically and culturally, it's practically an alien world compared to the rest of the country.
It operates almost autonomously in terms of culture. The ethnic groups speak entirely different languages than the Urdu and Punjabi-dominated South.
And their social norms are different.
Vastly different. In some specific northern areas, communities even produce and consume locally made alcohol.
Wait, really?
Yeah, which is strictly prohibited and heavily policed in the rest of the Islamic Republic. But most interestingly, demographers have noted that areas like the Hunza Valley exhibit characteristics of a blue zone.
Meaning they live incredibly long, healthy lives.
Exactly. The mechanism behind a blue zone usually involves a combination of high-altitude living, a tight-knit communal social structure that reduces chronic stress, and a highly specific, hyperlocal diet.
What do they eat up there?
In this case, their diet relies heavily on fresh apricots, local grains, and mineral-rich glacial meltwater.
Glacial water, wow.
It creates this pocket of extreme longevity and health that starkly contrasts with the life expectancy in the polluted, chaotic southern cities.
It sounds like an absolute paradise. But this perfection brings up a huge catch-22 among the travel creators.
Tourism versus preservation.
Harry and Chris both agree that Pakistan is unequivocally not ready for mass tourism. Chris argues that if 40 million tourists suddenly showed up in Pakistan the way they do in Thailand or Bali, the country would literally break.
He's all wrong.
The roads, the hotels, the ATMs, an entire fragile infrastructure we just talked about would instantly collapse under the weight.
But the deeper fear they express isn't just about roads and hotels.
Yeah.
You know, it's about the soul of the experience.
Yes. I was thinking about this, like discovering an incredible indie band playing in a tiny, divey basement venue.
Okay, another analogy, I like it.
The music is raw. The lead singer hangs out and drinks a beer with you after the show. It feels authentic and entirely yours.
Yeah.
But what happens when that indie band goes mainstream? A record label steps in, they start playing 50,000-seat stadiums, the tickets cost $300, and the lead singer won't even look at you without a VIP pass.
It loses its magic.
Does the very thing that makes Pakistan special, that aggressive, uncommodified hospitality where a local invites you into their home because you are a rare guest, does that instantly die the second a fleet of tour buses arrives?
It is the inevitable tragedy of scaling tourism without protective mechanisms in place. When you commodify a culture, you fundamentally alter the incentives of human interaction.
Because money gets involved.
Right. If a shopkeeper in a remote village sees one foreigner a year, it is an honor to offer them free tea. If that same shopkeeper sees 5,000 tourists disembark from buses every single day, he simply cannot afford financially or emotionally to give away free tea.
He'd go bankrupt.
The interaction must become monetized for his own survival. The authentic indie connection is replaced by a transactional, curated performance.
Which is what they didn't like about India.
Exactly. The vloggers fear that because Pakistan lacks the regulatory infrastructure to manage and protect its heritage sites, opening the floodgates to mass tourism would destroy the single greatest asset the country has, its genuine humanity.
They desperately need the foreign capital that tourism brings, but acquiring that capital might destroy the charm that attracts it in the first place.
It's a tough bind.
But here is where this deep dive takes a much darker turn. Because this lack of foundational infrastructure isn't just an inconvenience for Westerners trying to find a working ATM or a pristine mountain.
No, it affects everyone.
It is a systemic, terminal disease that profoundly impacts the nation's own citizens. And to understand how this institutional neglect destroys potential, we have to look at a heartbreaking microcosm provided by our sports source.
We are looking at an editorial from the Express Tribune regarding the performance of the national team at the 2026 ICC Women's T20 World Cup in England.
For listeners who don't follow cricket, you just need to know that in South Asia, cricket isn't just a sport. It is a religion and a massive point of national pride.
Oh, absolutely.
But the statistics presented in this editorial regarding the women's team are absolutely dismal. The author points out that Pakistan's women's team has competed in every single T20 World Cup since the tournament's inception in 2009.
That's a long time.
That is 17 years of continuous participation. And in those 17 years, they have never, not once advanced past the group stage.
Never.
Never. In this 2026 tournament, they didn't just lose, they were humiliated. They were crushed by Australia by a margin of 113 runs, beaten by India by 64 runs, and lost to Bangladesh by 23 runs.
And in the aftermath of such a systemic failure, the governing body, the Pakistan Cricket Board, or PCB, released their standard post-mortem explanations.
Yeah, they rolled out the classic PR spin machine. They claimed it was a young rebuilding team. They blamed the unfamiliar swinging conditions of the pitches in England. They said the opposition simply executed their plans better.
But the editorial fiercely and systematically dismantles these excuses.
The author basically says, stop lying to us. The piece explicitly states that the failure on the field has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of raw talent.
The talent is there.
Pakistan produces incredibly talented female athletes. The mechanism of failure is a complete, deliberate lack of institutional infrastructure. The author contrasts the women's team with the men's team.
And what's the difference?
The men get high-performance conditioning camps, sports psychologists, biomechanics experts, and critically, a highly funded, heavily competitive domestic T20 league that hardens the players before they reach the international stage.
Right.
The women's team gets none of this. They play a fraction of the competitive matches. They are starved of resources and funding. The editorial bluntly states that the PCB treats the women's team not as a national asset to be invested in, but as a secondary obligation to be begrudgingly fulfilled just to keep up appearances with the international cricket community.
There is a specific, brutal quote from the piece that acts as the thesis statement for the entire country, honestly.
Let's hear it.
17 years of the same result is not misfortune. It is policy.
That line is a gut punch.
It really is.
So I have to ask you to break this down. If the raw talent is clearly there and the national pride is on the line, why does the institution refuse to build the scaffolding to support these athletes?
It's a complex mix.
Is this purely a gender issue born out of a conservative patriarchal society that doesn't value women's sports? Or is this indicative of a much deeper structural rot in how the state operates at large?
Well, the gender dynamics of a conservative society certainly play a major role in the neglect. It's much harder to secure funding for women's sports in a patriarchal system. But you hit the nail on the head regarding the macro implication.
It's bigger than cricket.
Much bigger. This cricket failure is the perfect microcosm for the pathology of the Pakistani state. Institutions in Pakistan frequently survive entirely on the raw, individual brilliance of their people.
Just sheer willpower.
Going back to your indie band analogy, it's just pure, unrefined talent. But the institutions consistently failed to build the tedious, unglamorous, long-term scaffolding required for systemic excellence.
They skip the boring stuff.
They rely on the sheer willpower of a few individuals to achieve sporadic, miraculous victories. But they refuse to invest in the decade-long, boring structural work required to build a winning machine like the Australian team. It is infinitely easier for bureaucrats to blame a young team than to do the hard work of building a domestic league.
It is the triumph of short-term survival over long-term building, which is the exact terrifying dynamic that political analysts are currently sounding the alarm about on a national existential scale.
Now, before we unpack this final piece of analysis, it is critical that we set some parameters for the listener.
Yes, let's take a quick pause here. It's important to note for anyone listening that the analysis we are about to discuss from the Friday Times titled "Pakistan is on the Wrong Side of History" is a fierce, highly partisan, and politically charged critique.
Very charged.
The author is making aggressive claims about the internal workings of the Pakistani military, the judiciary, and the political elite. We, as your hosts, are not taking sides. We aren't here to validate or endorse his accusations. But we must unpack his argument in detail because it provides an incredibly clear window into the intense, boiling political anxieties happening inside the country right now.
Right. We are analyzing the mechanics of his argument, not adopting his political stand.
Exactly. So, with that framework in place, the author, Umar Farooq, comes out swinging. His core thesis is that Pakistan is fundamentally on the wrong side of history because in its 77 years of existence since that traumatic partition, it has never managed to agree on a functional set of rules for governing itself.
He points back to the 1973 Parliamentary Constitution. This document was supposed to be the bedrock. It was signed and agreed upon by major ideological leaders across the entire political spectrum.
Sounds good on paper.
But Farooq argues that the ink was barely dry before it was continually altered, bypassed, and contaminated by repeated military interventions and civilian power grabs.
He outlines a mechanism of power that dominated the country for decades, which he calls the Troika.
Right.
This was a three-headed monster of governance consisting of the president, the prime minister, and the exceptionally powerful army chief. And he notes that because the civilian institutions were kept weak, the army chief essentially became the diplomat-in-chief, holding the ultimate, unspoken power of regime change domestically.
Farooq's argument hinges on the concept of a political vacuum. Because the political parties remained weak, dynastic, and failed to build robust parliamentary traditions, a massive vacuum formed at the center of power.
And nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. Therefore, unelected bureaucrats rushed in to fill the void, specifically the judiciary, the military establishment, and the intelligence agencies.
And his critique of these unelected power centers is brutal. He accuses them of being entirely consumed by petty, internal, institutional interests.
He holds nothing back.
He says they are obsessed with their salaries, their real estate perks, and the pomp and show of their offices. He claims they engage in endless Machiavellian machinations just to protect their turf from one another.
And the media's role in this.
Yeah, that's the most damning part. He says that with the help of a complicit, access-driven media, these bureaucrats constantly gaslight the public, presenting their petty turf wars as heroic acts of saving the nation.
But here is where Farouk's piece moves from a standard political complaint to a real existential warning. While this internal bureaucratic knife fight consumes all the oxygen and resources in Islamabad, he warns that history and reality are literally passing the country by.
The world isn't stopping for them.
The world is accelerating toward massive civilization-altering crises, and Pakistan is wholly unprepared to face them because its leaders are too busy fighting each other.
He highlights two specific massive threats. The first is climate change. The source cites international climate scientists who warn that humanity has roughly 11 years left to stop irreversible carbon emission thresholds.
11 years is nothing.
Right. For a wealthy, structurally sound nation, 11 years is a tight window. For a structurally fragile state like Pakistan, the consequences are apocalyptic.
Because they can't adapt fast enough.
We aren't just talking about a few hot summers. We're talking about the very real mechanism of rising sea levels threatening to submerge massive coastal economic hubs like Karachi. We are talking about shifting monsoon patterns and severe droughts rendering massive tracts of the agricultural heartland completely barren.
And when agriculture fails?
When agriculture fails in a country of 240 million people, you get immediate food shortages, hyperinflation, and the chaotic mass migration of tens of millions of climate refugees internally.
And Farouk draws a very sharp, painful contrast with India here. He acknowledges that India is also geographically vulnerable to these same climate disasters.
They share a border.
Right. But the crucial difference is the economic mechanism. India possesses vast financial reserves, a rapidly modernizing infrastructure, and the material resources necessary to build a shield against these disasters. They can build seawalls, secure alternative supply chains, and weather the economic shock.
While Pakistan can't.
Pakistan, trapped in a cash-heavy informal economy with massive debt, simply does not have the financial shield to survive a direct hit.
The second existential threat he points to is global conflict. He notes that the global geopolitical stage is currently teetering on a knife's edge. You have escalating U.S.-China tensions, wars raging in the Middle East, and the ongoing Ukraine conflict.
It's a powder keg out there.
Farouk argues that the Pakistani state is historically highly reactive and intensely fragile when these external shocks hit the system.
He uses clear historical precedents to prove the mechanism of this fragility. When the Kargil conflict broke out with India in 1999, the resulting pressure led directly to a military coup that overthrew the civilian government. More recently, the economic shockwaves of the Ukraine war, specifically the spike in global energy and wheat prices, brought severe, crushing financial strain to Pakistan, which contributed directly to a chaotic regime change in Islamabad. The state machinery doesn't have shock absorbers. It panics and cracks under the economic and political pressures of global instability.
Okay, let me digest this incredibly grim picture and push back on Farouk's framing for a second.
Sure. What's the pushback?
Is he essentially arguing that the actual immediate danger to the average Pakistani citizen isn't necessarily the rising floodwaters or the threat of World War III, but the fact that the people in charge of the government are too busy playing an endless game of political musical chairs to even realize the ship is sinking, let alone start building a lifeboat?
That is precisely the core of his thesis. The ultimate tragedy of being on the wrong side of history, as he frames it, is not a lack of scientific awareness regarding these global trends. It is a structural, institutional inability to execute a solution.
They can't get out of their own way.
When the state institutions are entirely consumed by bureaucratic infighting and short-term survival, the government loses the capacity to prioritize long-term existential planning. If a massive climate disaster strikes, which it will professional, his fear is that the state will simply buckle and collapse under the pressure because there is no unified long-term systemic scaffolding in place to manage the crisis.
It is the exact same mechanism of failure as the women's cricket team. You have incredible potential facing a massive, well-prepared threat, but because the institution refused to build the foundational scaffolding, they are destined to be crushed.
Exactly. The cricket pitch is just a micro-simulation of the macroeconomic reality.
Man, that is a heavy, heavy reality to process. But it brings us to the end of our journey today. Let's pull all these threads together and wrap up this deep dive.
We have covered an immense expanse of time and space today.
We really have. We started by digging in the dirt of the 8,500-year-old Neolithic sites and walking the highly engineered streets of ancient Mohenjo-Daro. We explored how the trauma of the 1947 partition forged a modern identity entirely based on defensive vigilance. We walked the modern streets with vloggers who were bombarded with immense, heartwarming, uncommodified hospitality.
While simultaneously battling the infrastructural nightmare of rejected ATMs, horrible Wi-Fi, and punishingly spicy street food.
Exactly. We looked at the pristine, untouched beauty of the northern blue zones and debated the toxic double-edged sword of mass tourism. And finally, we confronted the frustrating systemic realities of neglected female athletes and a national political system paralyzed by petty infighting while staring down the barrel of a climate apocalypse.
It is a country defined by staggering, almost impossible contradictions.
So if you're listening, sitting in your car or at your desk right now, why does this matter to you? Why should you care about the internal mechanics of this labyrinth of a nation?
That's a great question.
Because Pakistan is the ultimate global bellwether for the 21st century. We are talking about a massive, nuclear-armed, culturally rich nation of over 240 million people sitting directly on the fault line of the developing world's greatest challenges.
The stakes are incredibly high.
How Pakistan navigates the crushing pressures of climate change, the desperate need for digital modernization, and the quest for political stability will not happen in a vacuum. It will ripple outward and fundamentally affect the geopolitical stability of the entire globe.
And as we close this deep dive, there is one final provocative thought I want to leave you with to mull over. It's a pattern that emerged repeatedly across every single source today. Throughout this entire discussion, we saw that the formal top-down state infrastructure consistently struggles, stalls, or outright fails.
Constantly.
The digital payment systems are broken, the national sports teams are starved of support, the political bodies are paralyzed by bureaucratic warfare, the formal blueprint of the state is fragile. Yet amidst all of that structural failure, the street-level citizens don't just survive, they find a way to thrive. They do this through a deeply embedded, culturally mandated, hyperlocal network of mutual support and radical hospitality.
Like the taxi driver refusing money.
Exactly. The taxi driver who refuses money from a guest. The elderly man who offers water to a stranger. The communities in the North building resilient, long-living societies. If the formal state continues to lag behind the crushing existential pressures of the modern world, could this informal, hyperlocal network of human generosity actually become the new, necessary framework for survival in the 21st century?
Wow.
When the institutions finally fail, is raw human connection the only infrastructure we have left?
That is an incredible thought to chew on. When the blueprint fails, you survive by relying on the person standing next to you. It really does force you to rethink how you look at a map. You expect those clean, bold lines and borders to tell you the complete story of a country, to define where things begin and where they end.
But they don't.
No. As we've learned today, the real story of a nation isn't found in the ink of the borders. It's found in the messy, beautiful, deeply resilient reality on the ground. Thank you so much for taking a plunge into today's deep dive with us. We will see you next time.